Hello, ma'am. Let us start our program. Hello, Reena, ma'am. Shall I start?
Okay, Sree.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay. Respected Principal, Dr. Reena, ma'am. Today's chief guest, former Principal Secretary to Prime Minister of India, Sri T.K. Nair, sir. IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Jaya Teacher. Research and Publications Committee Coordinator, Dr. Binu Teacher. Head of the Department of Commerce, Pravina Teacher. And my dear participants, welcome to the webinar and good evening to one and all. Parampara is one of the best practices of Sree Narayana College, Nattika. It is organizing a number of seminars organized by each and every department of our college. Today, in this year, Parampara is focusing on Sustainable Development Goals of UN Vision 2030. And its Commerce Department's turn to organize the inaugural session today. And we have selected one of the Sustainable Development Goals, that is climate action. So today's webinar is on Sustainable Environment Management, a talk on environmental impact assessment. This webinar series, Parampara, is organizing by Research and Publications Committee, IQAC, and Parents Teachers Association of Sree Narayana College, Nattika. This year, Parampara is with academic collaboration with Kerala State Higher Education Council. So before starting the webinar, I would like to remind you that please keep your microphones in mute mode so that we can avoid any interferences. And if you have any queries, you can use the chat box or you can raise directly the questions to the resource person. For YouTube viewers, you can use the WhatsApp group for raising the questions. I will help you there. So let us start the program with a formal welcoming of gathering. I would like to welcome Head of the Department of Commerce, Srimati Pravina Vijayan. Teacher.
Am I audible, Srila? Am I audible?
Yes, teacher. Yes.
Okay. Respected Principal Dr. Reena Ravindran, Honorable Chief Guest Sri T.K. Nair, sir, IQAC Coordinator Dr. JRPS, Coordinator of the Research Committee Dr. Binimol M, dignitaries and faculties from all over the country, my dear students, a warm welcome to one and all. The Research and Publication Committee of Sree Narayana College, Nattika, in collaboration with Kerala State Higher Education, in association with Kerala Higher Education Council, has organized a series of webinars for our students. This program is titled as Parampara, and we intend to provide our students an opportunity to interact with various academic experts in different fields. So today is the inaugural session of this Parampara 2020, and we, the Department of Commerce, Sree Narayana College, Nattika, has organized the inaugural talk on sustainable environment management, a talk on environment impact assessment. Sustainable development is a pattern of resource use, and it aims to meet the needs of human beings by giving proper preservation to our environment. So it is the need of the hour, and the UN has developed the Sustainable Development Goals in the Vision 2030. And on the basis of the 13th goal, that is climate action, we have selected this topic, sustainable environment management. In this pandemic situation, we are able to organize such webinars because of the inspiration, motivation, and guidance given by our respected principal, Dr. Reena Ravindran. On behalf of the Research Committee and on behalf of Department of Commerce, I welcome you, ma'am, to this program.
Thank you, Pravina.
It's of immense pleasure to introduce the resource person of the day, Sri T.K. Nair, sir. He is 1963 batch IAS officer from Punjab, Kedah. He has served as Chief Secretary of Punjab, Secretary of Government of India in the Ministry of Environment and Forest, and served as Principal Secretary and later as advisor to Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. He is the Managing Trustee of Citizen India Foundation, a charitable trust. He is also the Executive Vice President of Kerala Blood Bank Society and the member of Board of Governors of IIM Institute, Kozhikode, as well as the Center for Research in Rural and Industrial Development, Chandigarh. He also acted as chairman of Kerala State Industrial Development Corporation. A lot of awards and recognitions are in his name. Order of Rising Sun, Gold and Silver Star, awarded by the Government of Japan. Excellence in Bureaucratic Service offered by the World Malayali Council are a few of them. With immense pleasure, on behalf of Research and Publication Committee and on behalf of the Department of Commerce, I welcome you, sir, to this program.
Thank you.
I also welcome IQAC Coordinator Dr. Jaya PS, the Research Committee Coordinator Dr. Binimol M, and all the dignitaries and faculties across the country who have accepted our invitation and participating in this program. As you all know, this is a knowledge exchange program intended for students as well as teaching faculties to enrich their knowledge in various disciplines. So I'm sure that this session will be a thought-provoking and enlightening session for all the student as well as teaching community. Once again, I welcome all to this program. I also welcome the students to this program. Thank you.
Thank you, teacher. Now I invite our principal, Dr. Reena ma'am, for the presidential address. Ma'am.
Respected guest of honor, Sree T.K. Narayana, former Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister of India. Respected Vice President of PTA, Sree T.V. Raju. PTA Secretary, Dr. Soumya. Research and Publication Committee Coordinator, Dr. Binimol. Distinguished academicians from various institutes who have joined online. My dear colleagues and my dear students. Good afternoon to all. We have joined online to participate in the inaugural session of Parambara, a seminar series organized annually by Sree Narayana College, Nattika. This is one of the best practices of the institution. This is the third edition of this seminar series. And as you all know, in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, we are all confined to our homes and we are forced to organize this program online as webinar series. In a way, it's good, as we are all able to listen to eminent personalities from the comfort of their homes. And also many students and academicians all over are able to join and benefit from these programs going online. This academic year, we could organize several webinars on relevant topics and we were able to interact with many dignitaries in various fields. Parambara is distinct as far as our college is concerned because it is a platform exclusively for our PG and UG students to get acquainted with eminent scholars as well as present topics from their subject area before their peers. Parambara is a knowledge exchange program and it also serves as a platform for our students to experience the benefits of peer teaching and thereby realize that teaching is the best teacher. We want our students to move away from the dependence of teachers and improve their learning and increase their performance. In the previous years, students from all departments actively participated in the paper presentations, and as teachers, we were really happy to see that our students make the most of this opportunity offered to them. This program is financially supported by the PT of the college. Awards are given for the best paper presenters. And this year we had the collaboration of Kerala State Higher Education Council also. The first edition of Parambara was in 2018, the year in which our state experienced nature's fury as unprecedented rain leading to floods everywhere. So our focus that year was on Kerala after the deluge, and we discuss the after effects of flood in human life, plant and animal life, and how to overcome such disasters. In 2019, we had deliberations on trends and tenors of knowledge. This year, we are focusing on Sustainable Development Goals, a collection of 17 interlinked goals designed to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. Today's session is on sustainable environment management, and on behalf of all joined here, I invite our honorable resource person, Sri T.K. Nair sir, to inaugurate Parampara 2020 and to deliver a talk on environment impact assessment. I welcome, on behalf of all the participants, I welcome you to this session, sir. Hearty welcome, sir.
Thank you, Madam Principal, for your words of welcome and your very kind words of introduction. But at the outset, let me congratulate you and your colleagues, particularly those who are directly in charge of organizing this webinar in association with the Higher Education Council of the state. And I'm also happy to hear from you now that you have been conducting this series under the heading Parampara and subjects of contemporary relevance, not only to your students, but also to the general public at large, are the topics of your deliberations. And I'm also happy to know that other than students and the faculty of your own institution, teachers from other institutions, other colleges, educational institutions are also participating in it. Well, very good indeed. Let me also mention particularly that you did consider, after the aftermath of the 2018 flood, the causes of that, the situation arising out of that, and also what lessons could be learned from that very serious climatic event, which resulted in loss of lives, loss of property, and quite a lot of other inconvenience to the public, particularly the people living in those affected areas. Well, by now, environmental concerns are the topic of discussion on many fora. During the last few years, people all over the world, under different regimes, following different, patterns of government, they have all realized the importance of protecting and preserving our environment, which has been under considerable attack from nobody other than us, human beings who habitate our planet Earth. Well, you also know that other than planet Earth, there is no planet on which there is life in the form in which we know life in this planet. And we also realize that so far we have no means of completely stopping the process of environmental degradation, which has been going on for ages. The cause of the environmental degradation, to a large extent, is on account of human beings who inhabit the planet. But for meeting our requirements of life, for making our life easier, simpler, better, we have been, over a long period of time, exploiting nature. As a matter of fact, we took pride in the fact that we have nearly conquered nature. We have conquered the forces of nature. That's what we thought about at one point of time, that nature is now under our control. We can control the forces of nature to our advantage, and we can exploit all the resources on the planet for our well-being or for making life easier and better for us. But you know that for this process, what we describe in general terms as development or progress, we have to make use of the resources which are available in nature. Many of the activities which are described under the heading progress or development, they are consumed by way of raw materials, what is available in nature. And therefore, what is available in nature is the basis of all our development so far. Of course, science and technology has played the most important role in harnessing these forces of nature or these natural resources to our advantage. Well, people like us who live in the current generation, we can't think of a time when there was no electric power. Electric power is now the source of many of our economic activities. That is the starting point of many of our projects for development is the availability of power or the availability of electric power in many cases. Now, you think about the way in which we generate electricity. You know, in this stage, we have got a large number of hydroelectric projects which harness the waters of the rivers and the waterfalls, on the one hand for irrigation and on the other hand for generation of power. Now, look at what we do when we want to put in or put up a hydroelectric project. We make a study of how much of electricity can be generated and what would be the cost in putting up a generating station or putting a dam on the river or storing water. Ordinarily, these were the main considerations which we took into account while deciding on a hydroelectric project on a particular river. You can imagine a river which is known to you or which has got waterfall about which you have heard or which you have seen, and the process of harnessing that resource for generating power. Well, I need not emphasize that more than the money which is required for putting up that project, more than the technology that is necessary for for implementing that project, there are several other considerations. There are several other factors which impinge on that. But unfortunately, there was a time not long ago when most of us were ignorant of these considerations. But fortunately, as the awareness of people about environmental concerns became more and more, we are also becoming more and more aware of the kind of factors or the kind of concerns which we should take into account while deciding on a project. We talk about a hydroelectric project. You know, the technical people who know about the technological aspects of it will find out what is the best place where the water has got to be dammed and stored, and what is the technology used, or the machines to be used, and how they are to be installed for generating power. But we did not, at one point of time, not long ago, think about other aspects of this project. The objective of putting up a hydroelectric project is twofold, or objectives are twofold: water for irrigation and drinking water, and power for power for industry, for commerce, and for our lighting, etc., etc. So these are the two objectives which we want to achieve by putting up a hydroelectric project in a particular river at a particular place. Well, today we know that while we implement a project in a given place, lots of other considerations have got to be taken into account. For instance, for whose benefit are we putting up this project? Who are the beneficiaries of this project? Are they just industries? Are they just households? Or are they other beneficiaries also from the power that is generated? Secondly, in the process of putting up that project, how much of natural resource we are consuming, the place where it is located, whether it will mean destruction of your natural resource by way of forests. In many cases, if you want to put up a dam, you have got to use land which otherwise would have been a forest area, mostly in our situation in Kerala. So submergence of land with vegetation is an inevitable consequence of a hydroelectric project. And there are costs. When you say that submergence takes place, and as a consequence, lots of flora, lots of fauna, they are lost for good. They have a value. Do we take into account the value of that while we calculate the cost of the project? Secondly, in many cases, displacement of people may be necessary for implementing one part of the project or the other. And the displacement of human beings also costs, both in terms of human misery and in terms of other forms of suffering. Houses may be destroyed, farmlands may be utilized for other purposes. So environment means all these factors which are relevant from the point of view of a project. And a project can be a hydroelectric project. A project can be, one for construction of a road. A project can be for construction of a bridge. A project can be for putting up a large industrial unit. In most cases, these are land-based projects, and therefore there is the requirement of land. Land is not an unlimited resource. Particularly in Kerala, it is a very scarce commodity. It's a very scarce, very limited resource. In a thickly populated state like India, or like Kerala, every inch of land is precious. So before we propose, say, X acres or Y square kilometers of land would be utilized for this project or would be required for this project, at once we have to think of the consequences of that. Most importantly, are people going to be affected? Are people going to be displaced? And if they are going to be displaced, then the cost of that, they have to be provided alternate accommodation for which you have to search for land, even if the entire money is in your hands. And then the dislocation caused by the displacement, that again is the cost, both in terms of money and human suffering, which has got to be taken into account. And again, the flora and the fauna, both these are very, very integral part of our environment, of our nature, and also of biodiversity as a consequence of the implementation of a land-based project is an extremely important consideration. Similarly, the fauna in that area, some species, some species are now becoming extinct as a result of human activities. So all these considerations together have to be taken into account in an integrated manner while we think in terms of a project. And depending upon the size of the project, some may have environmental consequences of a grave nature or of a larger magnitude than some others. Size alone need not be the consideration. Even small projects, small in the sense that small in terms of investment, or small in terms of the land they require, even such projects could be of disastrous consequences to the environment, which creates pollution. In Kerala, we are not very much badly as affected by environmental pollution as people living in say, cities like Delhi or Mumbai, or even some rural areas in some other parts of the country. Fortunately, still, we have substantial area of forest not yet being destroyed. But of course, the norm which is prescribed for the area of forest land to be maintained, we are slightly below that, but still we are better off compared to other states. Therefore, it becomes important for us now to ensure that we do not encroach upon more and more forest land. More and more forest lands are not utilized for any project. You know that Government of India became very, very conscious of this, very much aware of it. And when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister of India, she was a great champion of environmental protection, and she, during that period of time, she promoted the, a legislation, the Indian Forest Conservation Act, under which it is extremely difficult to convert forest area into non-forest area. At one point of time, it was made practically impossible, but because of pressure from project proponents, pressure from population, slight modifications have been made, and it is slightly less difficult than it was in the past to acquire or use forest land for non-forest purposes. Let's also realize, I'm sure students of botany would know it better than others, that these forests play a very, very significant role, a very important role in our ecology. You see, in the water that comes through the rain, that water is stored as our underground water through the root systems of the forests. So the forests are extremely important for groundwater regeneration. Similarly, they play a part. They are our carbon sinks. You have heard this phrase, carbon and carbon sink. Carbon is what we breathe out. Carbon sink is a term which is used to denote that these are the ways in which the carbon dioxide which is exhaled can be stored so that they do not cause damage to human beings and to nature. The carbon dioxide is not a very friendly, air, and concentration of carbon dioxide can create climate change and other very, very serious consequences. So if you want to cut it short, one way in which it is proposed or it is possible to reduce these greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce pollution, is to have large tracts of forests, and therefore the importance of tree plantation. We talk about tree plantation as a program. It is being promoted by the state government, by the central government. We have got we observe weeks or days for plantation of forests. Now, I'm mentioning all these things not in a very, very systematic, orderly manner, but to bring home the point that preservation of the environment, conservation of our ecology, it is extremely important. And global studies done over a period of time have conclusively proved that because of human activities, increasing human activities, like industrialization, etc., the temperature is rising very, very, very gradually, but temperature is rising, and the consequence of this temperature rise is what we call climate change. And the disastrous effects of climate change are now known. Let me, at this point in time, relate the extreme climate events which are taking place today more than ever before. You hear about floods, you hear about droughts, you hear about cyclones, you hear about wildfires all over the world. They are all the consequences of disturbing the balance in the nature. Now, considering the importance of all these, governments all over the world have made it a point to institutionalize measures which can reduce the adverse impact of human activity on the environment, and also to regulate those activities in such a manner that they cause the least damage to nature. So if I read out to you for your convenience and for easily understanding in a systematic way what is or what are the objectives in precise terms of environment impact assessment. Environment impact assessment is the process or the study through which the consequences of putting up a project on the environment are listed and are studied, and measures which can be thought of to lessen or to reduce those adverse consequences. So if you listen to me carefully, the objective of environment impact assessment is to offer information to decision makers concerning matters that may be brought about as a result of decisions relating to a new project, a program, or a plan. Environmental impact assessment must realize decision making based on the inputted information, including potentially important factors that must be beneficial for both the proponent and the citizens. Here the term proponent is used to denote those of us who are trying to put up a project. A project proponent is a person or an authority or an institution which is trying to put up a project. As I mentioned, this project could be building a road, it could be building a bridge, it could be setting up an industry, it should be setting up a hydroelectric project or even atomic power station. Now, these are projects. The projects vary in size, they vary in the objectives which they are seeking to achieve, and the operational methods, the requirements of land, air, water, etc., etc. They differ from project to project depending upon the objective of that project. Furthermore, environmental impact assessment is a technique that presents in a systematic manner a technical assessment of impacts on the environment that the project is likely to cause. That's what I said, that the impacts, the effects of a project on the environment. Make an assessment of that. That is environment impact assessment. That's a process. It's not a one-dimensional activity, as the impact on the environment can be manifold, can be diverse. Therefore, people who have expertise, knowledge in various disciplines, like say water, like say air, like forest, expertise which is relevant to all these areas are necessary depending upon the nature of the project. So it's not only studying the utilization of water. If you are thinking of a hydroelectric project, it's not just about generation of power. Those are only objectives, but in realizing those objectives, the activities that we undertake would impinge upon many aspects. So all these have got to be studied, all these got to be systematically listed, and they act upon each other. The impact of one on the other, they have to be assessed. So it's a systematic listing of various aspects relating to the project and assessment of their impact on the nature, including on the people who are maybe who are naturally inhabitants of that area. They all form part of a process of environment impact assessment. So let me complete reading out these definitions. It makes the concerned ministries or agencies assess the potential results of the project before a decision is given. Obviously, environment impact assessment is a prerequisite for taking up any project activity. Let's understand that, as I briefly mentioned, over a period of time, state and central governments, local authorities, they have promulgated rules, regulations, and laws under which projects have got to come up. If you want to put up a housing project, if you want to put up a multi-story housing project, if you want to put up a power project, you just can't go and do it. You have to prepare a project report, and based on that project report, an assessment of the project in terms of its environmental impact is made. So it's actually a systematic, objective assessment, study of the various components that make up a project. So it is that assessment which is called the environment impact assessment. Finally, it makes the concerned ministries or agencies assesses the potential results of the project before a decision is given. Okay, let's imagine a project of constructing a road. Road, the primary objective is to connect one place to the other so that it becomes easy for people to travel. Now, if a road is planned in a given locality, what are the benefits that accrue to that locality or to the people? How many people are going to be benefited? What is the benefit that they get? In the absence of the project, what do they stand to lose? How much more kilometer they have to walk? How much more time they have to spend on walking? These are on one considerations, one set, which justify the proposal to construct a road. On the other hand, you have to see how much land is required, whether that land is under cultivation or whether it is a fallow land, and whether there are any streams or anything of the kind to be crossed, whether you have to build culverts, whether you have to divert the course of any water channel. All these have got to be considered while we think of a project, even a small village road project. The project may be small, in terms of its complexity, it may be simple, but still it has got those aspects. And we have reached a time when human activities are causing so much of, have already caused so much of damage to environment that in future, even the smallest of those environmental, destruction or environmental disturbance, we should be careful to avoid. So the objective is to see that project activities which we undertake for the benefit of the people. It's all for the benefit of the people. It's not for just the sake of having the fun of a road. No, it's because we believe that a road benefits the people. But in providing that benefit, what is the impact on nature? So you have to weigh the pros and cons. You have to see on one side the supposed benefit, the proposed benefits which we anticipate, and on the other side we have to assess, the cost of getting that done. To give a small example of a road is to illustrate the point that every activity is supposed to achieve an objective, a desirable objective to human beings, and we have to, when we take a decision, yes, this road is necessary, this is justified, then we would have taken into account the cost, not just in terms of buying that piece of land, in terms of its environmental cost. So these considerations are very, very important, because in the absence of such considerations, our hasty decisions to undertake activities which impinge upon nature have brought us to this level, where we are worried about climate change. We are worried that if drastic steps are not taken to reduce carbon emission in the next 20 to 30 years, we will reach humanity, the planet Earth will reach a stage where life would become nearly impossible. So it's a realization of this very, very huge, very genuine challenge supported by scientific data, by science, that nations of the world, people all over the world are getting concerned. Now I continue reading out for your convenience the major steps which are taken when we systematically, scientifically make an assessment of a project. That it is to disclose the significant environmental effects of the proposed project to the decision makers and the public. Take the case of the road itself, or the village road itself, to disclose to the decision maker the proposed project activities and the environmental effect. If the road is to be built, what is the area to be acquired or to be used, how many trees are going to be cut, what other, whether it will affect the life of birds or any other animals, and whether it will create any other difficulty, any other problem for the people living in the area and also for the environment. You systematically list out all these. Number two, to identify ways to avoid or to reduce environmental damage. Very important from a very practical point of view. It is just not for the purpose of saying no to a development activity. No. A road is a necessity, is a must in many areas. At the same time, that road, which is supposed to or meant to connect place A to place B, the route of it can be different. The alignment of the road can be different. So from an environmental point of view, if you look at it, you look at different alternatives of connecting A to B and then make an assessment which is the least environmentally damaging. It's very simple, but we normally don't do it. We have a fixed mind. We believe that this is the best. Do it, because this is the least, in terms of distance covered. That's not the only factor. There are other factors also. So list out all those factors and choose which is least destructive from the environmental point of view. Number three, to prevent adverse environmental impact by regulating implementation of feasible alternatives or mitigation measures. I talked about alternatives. For many projects, alternatives could be thought of. Again, going out of the example of the road, electricity, if that is our objective, there are various ways of producing electricity. You have to assess, the practicality and the viability of those different alternatives. Say Kerala is deficit in electricity, but we are at a stage where, thanks to a national power grid, you can buy power which is produced elsewhere, or we can produce power using solar energy. So these are the alternatives to a hydroelectric project, to give you an instance. So those alternatives have got to be studied, and the alternative that you ultimately choose, in that also, if there are going to be adverse environmental impact, how to mitigate, how to lessen the impact of that. That is another very important aspect from a practical point of view. How to reduce or to lessen the adverse impact on the environment on account of the implementation of a project. Then to disclose the reasons of the proposals to the people of the area with, most of the time you don't do it. Particularly when these projects are undertaken by government departments, government officers, including those at the very top, they believe that they know what is best. An engineer will think that he knows how best a road alignment has to be given. But seldom does he think in terms of what are the views of the people who are supposed to be benefiting from the road. The beneficiaries concerned or the people who are affected, they have to be heard. Their point of view has got to be taken into account. Well, we know that, today you are witness to many agitations when it comes to acquiring land for projects, when it comes to locating a particular project, which the people of the area may think is going against their interests. In Kerala, we have several agitations of people against locating, these waste management projects or waste disposal projects. People object to dumping waste or processing waste in their locality. Most of the time, you may be out of ignorance, and therefore, it is extremely important for project proponents to consider the impact of the project on the people, and that impact is what is studied through a process of public participation in the decision making. Today in India, for large projects which affect large areas or which affect habitations or which affect the quality of water or air, there is what is called a public hearing of projects. I do not know how many of you have heard about this. There is a process under which, as a part of the environment impact assessment, the public people living in that area, they are taken into confidence. The process is that, suppose it is the electricity board trying to put up a project in a village A. What is done is the electricity board makes a detailed project report indicating all requirements of the project, including also the technology to be used and the impact of those on the area. And with all these, including the cost calculations, etc., if people have got to be, rehabilitated, they have to be displaced, all these considerations are taken into account in what we call a detailed project report. So for purposes of public hearing, the electricity board will, through the collector of the district, make available to the affected people details of the project report. It may be pasted on the doors of public institutions like panchayats or revenue officers, etc. The basic objective is that the people know what is proposed to be done. And then, once they have been given the opportunity, the time to study and understand what it means, what it implies for them, a public hearing is conducted, normally by the sub-collector or by the district collector, where the people who are concerned with the project, people who are affected by the project, including the NGOs and all, they are being given an opportunity to express publicly their views. If they are in favor, they can say that. If they have an objection about any particular part, they can bring it out. They can suggest alternatives. Say, for instance, it's a large road project or a large bridge project on a particular point on a river. In the public hearing, the people living in that locality could even suggest an alternate location, which is less, environmentally destructive. I'm just giving you a possibility, an example of what is possible. So the basic purpose is to make the people understand, which will help on the one hand in avoiding any possible misunderstandings, and number two, in enabling them to suggest ameliorative measures so that the adverse impact of the project, if any, are brought to the minimum, to the least level. And then another objective is to foster interagency coordination. Well, you need not be a senior officer in government to understand that practically every activity that we undertake has many repercussions. Think in terms of a school building, a college building. Once the land is acquired, for which the revenue department is involved, the area is surveyed, for which the surveyors are required for preparing a project report. The details of the land will be required from the survey or the registration department, and the people who are in charge of water supply, in charge of electricity, in charge of construction, they are all concerned with it. A government building, the construction part of it in itself is looked after by more than one agency. In many cases, there is an electrical wing under the PWD, which looks at the electrification part. There is another one which looks at the sanitation part. And the other one, the structural part of it. So all these agencies, they have to coordinate their activities. Of course, I forget about the architect, the man who plans the whole thing. So coordination of these agencies is required, very much required, while you think in terms of implementing a project, and the environment impact assessment takes note of that, whether there has been adequate coordination or whether it is a disjointed, uncoordinated proposal. Now, finally, what is listed is to enlist public participation. I mentioned that public participation can be only through eliciting public opinion. You can't expect the people to participate in an activity about which they are not aware of. You have to make them aware of the project, the impact of it, the various aspects of it, so that you can elicit their cooperation. Because we know that most of these projects, particularly relating to public works, etc., they cannot make progress unless there is the willing consent, the knowledge, participation of the people, the beneficiaries, as well as those who are affected by it in one way or the other. Now, friends, these are the techniques through which project assessment or project management is planning to get, or project managers are getting environmental impact assessment. Now, what's the purpose of all these activities? These activities, which are undertaken by hundreds of thousands of institutions, in the country, and very, huge involvement of international organizations when it comes to, intergovernmental or international projects. Well, in one word or in one sentence, the ultimate objective of all these activities is to ensure that our environment is protected, the least damage is caused to the environment as a consequence of developmental activities that we pursue. But friends, we all know that Kerala, like many other areas in India, like many other different countries, are in the process of socio-economic development. These are countries which are extremely poor. There are hundreds of thousands of people who do not have, 3 meals or 2 meals to eat in a day. Their income is extremely low. Many of them, particularly in times of distress like COVID, They have no jobs. They have no means of livelihood. So governments all over, including intergovernmental organizations, international organizations, they are all trying their very best to make the life of the poor people a little better. The ultimate aim of all these activities by governments, by international agencies at the higher level and up to the level of the panchayat, the lower level. These are all activities aimed at making the life of the people a little better. Those who cannot afford 3 meals a day, at least to make sure that they get 2 meals a day. There are hundreds of thousands of people who cannot afford that. Similarly, forget about meals. There are hundreds of thousands of people for whom safe drinking water is not available. Most of us can't imagine that, but even in our country, India, we have many pockets, both in the rural areas and in the urban slums, where adequate availability of safe drinking water is still a dream. We have a massive program aiming at making available potable drinking water to all the households. Similarly, lighting, not even a bulb in many households, many villages which are still to be effectively connected to. So countries, poor countries, including India, we are striving hard to take our areas or to take our people to the next level of human development. Provide them safe drinking water, pure air, a place to live, and an opportunity to work for earning their livelihood. So creating livelihood opportunities, creating environmentally sustainable habitations, these are the primary aims, objectives of all the governments, whether it is the government of Kerala, government of Tamil Nadu, or the government of India. In different ways, we are trying to achieve the same common objective. Political parties in power in different states, they may put it in different words, in different language, through different schemes. But the ultimate objective is making life of the poor people a little better. You see, I won't like to give you figures in terms of what is happening all over the world, what is happening in different states of India. But remember that although Kerala is a much, much better place than most of the other states in India, we also still have pockets of problems where we have to make sure, for instance, habitats for all the people. It's a very ambitious program of the government to provide a livable, habitation or a livable accommodation to the people. Those of you who have seen pictures of the slums of Bombay, of Mumbai, hundreds of thousands of people live in shanty towns, with tin or plastic sheet roof over their head, braving the sun, braving the floods, braving the rains. So it's a mammoth task. It's a huge task. And while doing this, whatever I mentioned, providing clean air, clean water, providing electricity, providing habitation, providing livelihood opportunities, we have to undertake many, many, many activities. These activities will also have definitely some consequence or some impact on the environment. So certainly, efforts will be made to minimize those environmental costs. At the same time, we have to realize that there is no more degrading and active, degrading, a phenomenon than poverty. Can you think of something worse than poverty? All human beings, all of us, born and brought up on this planet Earth, we think in terms of what? Living well. But for hundreds of thousands of people, living well means having 2 square meals a day, having a shelter, having a proper drinking water. So the great efforts of all of us together, states, center, panchayats, schools, colleges, students, is ultimately to ensure a better or create conditions in which our fellow human beings can live above the poverty line. We describe, a certain calorie intake a day as the cutoff for people who are above the poverty line and below the poverty line. So we have hundreds of thousands of people, as I said, below the poverty line. All our activities, whether it is in terms of making sure that the project is better implemented with the greatest of cost, efficiency, with the least amount of time, least amount of environmental, damage. Ultimately, all have to produce this result. So, my dear friends, I do not want to, to give you or to go more and more into this area of the impact of poverty and the reality of poverty and the concept of environment impact assessment when we take projects aimed at different, aimed at projects in different areas or in different fields, all aimed at making the life of the people better in terms of their material comforts to begin with. So if you have any questions, I am willing to answer you. Otherwise, I would once again thank you for taking this initiative, because it's a crying need of the hour. Make people aware of environment, making people aware of the very disastrous consequences of environmental degradation. These are not fictions. These are not in the imagination of scientists. These are not the product of imagination of poets and writers. These are reality which we are facing. And most unfortunately, once the distress condition is over, human beings tend to forget. How many of us remember the disastrous consequences of the flood in Kerala in 2018? Not many. And most regrettably, unfortunately, some of the causes which created that flood, we have not been able to eradicate. We still persist in that because we find that that is in our immediate interest. Environment impact assessment, etc., they take time. They take effort. They may also involve a little bit of sacrifice. But we are in a hurry. We want to do things in no time. We don't have time to think, particularly to think about others. We are so selfish, so self-centered. If my project makes me 10 rupees more, hell with the environment. I will try, by hook or crook to get that. Look at the huge big building complexes which have come up on very environmentally fragile, on impermissible area in any city in Kerala, particularly Kochi. Recently, you had the case of the Supreme Court and the High Court intervening to ensure that a couple of buildings were really demolished because they were against all environmental norms. There are many such buildings because there are many people who have invested money in putting them up. They were bothered only about making money. They were not bothered about the consequences of their action on environment. And again, most regrettably, many times the environment impact assessment reports which we get made are also very imperfect. They are also cooked up reports. Data is not reliable, assessment is not objective, and conclusions are not clear, giving room for further and further degeneration and deterioration of our living environment. So, most of you, I believe, are students or or teachers who are teaching students. So, it would be a big thing if the coming generation is imbued with these ideas, that from beginning they know the surroundings in which they live and the importance of keeping them clean, the importance of clean air, of safe drinking water, which can be available only if the total environment is clean. So friends, once again, without more repetition, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I hope and believe that at least some of you will imbibe one or two of these thoughts, and that will inspire you, motivate you. You will keep them in mind while you reach positions of authority, when you can take decisions, or positions when you can make investment decisions. Some of you may become builders, some others may become contractors, some of you may become government officers. All of you will have to deal with the environment in one way or the other. So, if a bit of these thoughts linger on in your minds, I believe that that would go a little way in tackling the huge problems that we are facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now it's open for interactions. If you have any queries, you can directly raise the questions to the resource person, or you can use the chat box.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, I can
Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, one question from Bijit, sir. We have the Sustainable Development Goals by the UN to achieve not later than 2030. Whether the Indian policymakers and implementation agencies strictly sticking on to goals while formulating policies and implementing projects, sir?
Well, my dear friend, in formulating policies, we are not lagging behind at all.
Okay, sir.
Pursuing earlier they were known as the Millennium Development Goals. Today they are known as the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, as some of you mentioned, and there is a plan of action approved by the government for achieving each of these objectives. And every year, the state governments, and more importantly, the government of India, in the DBIO, they make an assessment of the progress in implementing various projects which are listed under the 17 objectives. But let me say, without looking at the latest figures, that's extremely difficult for us to attain those objectives within those given targets, particularly now in the midst of this COVID. It's a great break on many of our developmental activities. So give consideration for that, and rest assured that in terms of policies and programs, we are not lagging behind.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, one more question, sir. So many projects in our country results in the imbalancing of nature, sir. So what are the possible measures will you, sir, suggest where others can do it with utmost seriousness?
Well, I agree. There are many projects which have come up with the proper environment impact assessment, and many more with the environment impact assessment, but without caring for taking ameliorating measures which are proposed in the environment impact assessment. Because unfortunately, people resort to shortcuts, both in terms of saving time and, more importantly, for saving money. So therefore, when it comes to schemes and projects of Government of India, it is the lag in implementation, the different stages through which implementation has got to take place, that is there. And when it comes to individual projects, I mean, you look at the many what you call residential flats which have come up in your own area. Each one of them, I am sure, would have gone through an environment impact assessment process. You know, whether it is fake or genuine, I do not know. But on
Okay, sir.
paper, they would have been assessed. And on paper, most of them, 90% of them, would have been cleared by the municipal corporation or the panchayat or whatever be that authority. And if today you go and check without any large notice, you will see that in terms of implementation, they would all be lagging behind. In many cases, there may be a facility. It may not be put to use. In many cases, you may provide for, say, a very simple thing, like your safety. It's supposed to be safety measures in terms of fire safety, etc., etc. In terms of approval on paper, all the fire safety equipments, systems are in place. But if you go there on the spot, it may just not be there. That's because of the nature of our people. I mean, it's not far different from other people in other parts. So we can talk about ourselves. So each one of us has a role to play. You cannot say it is somebody else's responsibility. Corporations, panchayats, local bodies, constructors, individual flat owners, all of us, when it comes to a flat, we are responsible. We have to play our part.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Sir, one final question from me, sir. I'm Binimol. Sir, waste management is a big problem in our country we are facing, especially in Kerala too. So why there is no strict policies or strict laws to management of this waste and all, sir?
Are you living under a municipality or a panchayat or a corporation?
Panchayat, sir. Panchayat.
Right. Okay. The panchayat may not have a
Yeah.
scheme. Panchayat may not have much of a problem. But you see, you just look around and see what kind of waste is generated first, and what are the sources of this waste. I'm sure in the absence of any industry or any kind of large commercial activity, the source of this pollution would be our own households, isn't it? We buy milk in milk pouches. Those milk pouches, they don't degrade. They are a source of pollution. You bring your foodstuffs in plastic cups or in polythene covers. You don't eat the polythene cover or plastic cup. You eat what is inside that, and you throw out, the container. Those containers are not degradable. Those containers accumulate. Those containers stop the flow of water in the drain in front of you. Therefore, the drain bursts in times of rain. It causes flood or such a spilling away of slush and mud, and the whole area becomes unlivable. This is what happens. You think in terms of putting up, well, in small villages there is no need for large plans for waste, regeneration or waste management. It can be done. Each one of us will have at least 10-15 cents of land. Where did you dig a pit? Where did you put what is degradable at least into that? We don't do it. But these are the ways in which these things have got to be done. You can't expect the chief minister of the state or the president of the panchayat to come and do this for your household. This has got to be done in each house. We have a part to play in that. Hundreds of thousands of houses constitute a town, a state, and then the problem becomes unmanageable. So if you tackle this pollution at the source, the problem is managed. If you do not, then it escalates into big problems which are not available to small solutions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for answering me, sir. Excellent presentation, sir. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now it's time for the felicitation for the Parambara series. I invite Head of the Department of Hindi and PTA Secretary, Dr. Soumya CS. Hello.
Hello everyone, am I audible?
Yes, teacher, yes.
Okay. Respected Principal, Honorable Sree T.K. Nair sir, colleagues and friends from all over Kerala, I'm extremely privileged to form a part of this webinar, which owes the deliberations to sustainable environment. In this times of steadfast development, sustainability is an alcove of thoughts and actions. As a member of the PTA, I'm elated to offer endearing greetings to this webinar. And let me take this opportunity to extend greetings to TK Nair sir for his in-depth deliberations. And on behalf of the PTA, let me extend the felicitations for the future webinars too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Soumya teacher. Now it's time for delivering the vote of thanks. I would like to invite Coordinator of Research and Publications Committee, Binimoy teacher. Teacher?
Thank you, Srila. Am I audible, Srila?
Yes, teacher, you can.
Okay. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this inaugural session of Parambara 2020 on behalf of Research and Publication Committee, Sree Narayana College, Nattika. First of all, I would like to propose a hearty vote of thanks to our Honorable Chief Guest of today, Sri T.K. Nair, for gracing today's webinar on Environment Impact Assessment. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your very motivating and thought-provoking inaugural session. The way you explained the topic is exemplary, sir. I'm sure that all the participants that have taken note of your suggestions and follow-up action will be initiated at their level. Thank you, sir. I would once again, I would like to express my profound gratitude to our respected principal, Dr. Sree Narayana ma'am, for her immense support and guidance to make this session a grand success. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to express vote of thanks to our staffs, all the committee members, especially to Anapa, Srila, Babita, Shankaran sir, and other teacher for such an appreciating involvement and the willingness they have expressed to finish this task and make this as a momentous event. Finally, I thank all the participants who have participated overwhelmingly and make the event a grand one. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now today's webinar is winding up. So the e-certificates will be issued later. Within 1 week we will issue, because we have an academic collaboration with Kerala State Higher Education Council. So it will take some time for issuing the e-certificate. For issuing that e-certificate, we will issue the feedback form also. So keep in the WhatsApp group also for that link. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much.